I just wanted some clarification on tithing.
And being enabled to forgive somebody who causes an offense
Does
towards
it really matter whether someone is Protestant or Catholic?
The genealogies are different from Matthew to Luke.
I was wondering what the Bible said in terms of what I should do.
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. Call right now with your question at 1-888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also post your question at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pastor's Perspective program. We are ready to answer your questions about the Bible, Christianity, other religions. Give us a call, just about anything that's on your mind. 888-564-6173 is the phone number. Again, that's 888-564-6173. And hello to everybody watching us on YouTube and facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective or facebook.com/ anything, because I know some of our affiliate radio stations carry the program, and they also share the Facebook link on their Facebook pages. So thank you so much for doing that. In the studio, Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. And look who's back, the one and only 1 minute apologist, Bobby Conway. Hello, fellas. How you doing?
Hello. It's good to be back with you guys.
It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Deep South. Tell us about North Carolina.
Yeah, I went back to North Carolina.
To get a haircut?
To get a haircut. No, I actually cut my own hair today before I came into work. And I shaved my big goatee off because my wife said, she said, I feel like I'm married to a really old man. So I said, all right, well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Let me shave that bad boy off.
Yeah. No, I knew something was different about you. I thought it was your shirt, but it's actually your hairless face.
My hairless face. Yeah, that's right. So I'm getting cleaned up coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
Got to go to the gym today
Yeah.
for the first time in 3 months. So felt fantastic. But no, had a good time. Got to see my family. Got to meet with some different people as it related to just connecting them to our ministry called the 1 Minute Apologist. And just glad to be back, though.
Yeah.
Missed you guys.
Yeah, missed
Sincerely,
you
I love the privilege of being able to do this role. I love the connection that I have with you guys. And I just love that, you know what, we're answering questions that people are asking right here in this moment.
Yeah.
It was getting really bad for Bobby. It's been a week and a half since he answered a Bible question. So a few days ago, he was just coming up to people on the street, ask me a Bible question. And he's glad to be back.
And he said, I'll answer any question in 1 minute.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I did do some, we created an apologetics crash course that's going to be coming out. We're going to be doing these crash courses at our ministry, 1 Minute Apologist. So like a crash course on LGBTQ, a crash course on, racism, a crash course on Buddhism or Hinduism or all this stuff. So we just got one completed.
Great.
And that's going to be coming out. I'm really excited about that.
So what is how much engagement are you having with a crash course? Is it an hour? Is it a few hours?
This one's 2 hours.
2 hours.
8 different sessions. And we're going to create small group discussion questions so people can get the crash course. They can watch it by themselves. They'll get the PowerPoint slides. They'll get the notes. Or they can even do it in a small group setting and watch 8 different sessions, go over the discussion questions. And so that was one thing that we decided we really want to start doing at the 1 Minute Apologist are these different crash courses. So kind of like what you've done a lot of, Brian, these pamphlets that kind of give an explanation to a doctrine of curiosity.
Yeah.
I think it's just taking that idea in video format.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
We'll have to do one together.
Let's do one.
Yeah.
Let's do one on critical theory.
Hey, I read through, we've been going back and forth a little bit today, and the article I sent you, I started really working my way through that. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Yeah, I've kind of read up on that over the past few years, because it is such an interesting bundle of stuff.
It is.
And I was thinking, even on the way over, just, we don't want to go into the whole topic, but I just think, when you interject a lot of this stuff into, the church or trying to figure out how we should do things, I think, really it's so much simpler if you just did what the Bible said then you wouldn't have to embrace all of these other ideas,
That's right.
I mean, it's really a failure on the part of, Christians to just live according to Scripture and to apply Scripture evenly across the board and all of that. So then you come up with all of these theories, which is understandable from the, merely the world's point of view. But, there are some in the church that think we should adopt critical theory as well and bring it in. And so the idea, just quickly, because we're throwing this word around, critical theory is the idea that there's basically just two kinds of groups of people in the world. There's the oppressors and the oppressed. And the oppressed are the ones that really have the right to speak. The oppressors need to just shut up and, quit oppressing. It's way more complicated than that, but that's kind of the simple version of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I was in seminary, the big talking point was postmodernism.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously, I don't even think that we live in a postmodern culture because it's not livable. Nobody can live postmodern. You don't go to get a doctor and get a prescription and say, you know what, I'm just not going to take this. I'm going to be postmodern. Just kind of go with my gut on what I feel. Well, we want objective things, but nobody could really define postmodernism.
Yeah.
I think critical theory is a bit amorphous like that. It's going to be hard to really shape up an answer.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's just forget critical theory and go to the Bible.
Yes. Unless somebody has a question about critical theory, you can call us 888-564-6173. Pastor Brian, how was service this past Sunday, the first one in the sanctuary?
It was fantastic.
I shouldn't say the first one in the sanctuary. The first one with people in attendance.
That joined him.
One with people back on the campus. Yeah. It was really, really good. We had a great time. I just, judging from the excitement in the voices and on the faces of the people that I connected with, I think everybody really, really loved it. And, we had a good response. We had the reservation, so people signed up and they came. And it's interesting. We had about a 20% no-show. And so it just seems like that's kind of that 20% thing is sort of across the board what's usually happening. But we had a really, really good time. So we did 8:30, 11, and we did 7 p.m. And actually the 7 p.m. went really well also. And so we thought we're going to just do that one. We were thinking, no, we're not going to keep the 7 p.m. going. But then it went so well, we thought maybe we should keep it going. But we don't want to do it on Father's Day. So we're going to keep Sunday night at 7 going, but we're going to skip Father's Day and come back on the following Sunday and do the 7 o'clock. Yeah, so there was it was a different group of people, and it was like, okay, wow, here's a group of people that actually seem to want to come on the evening rather than make it in the morning.
Yeah.
Whether they had to work or they had other things going. So anyway, it was fantastic. Yeah, it was really good.
I bet that felt great.
Yep.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, it was 3 months to the Sunday since we had a meeting. And so, I mean, it is, we do have a sanctuary that seats 2,000 people, and when you've got 100 people in there, it is a little bit like, okay, here we are.
Right.
It's sort of like I'm in my living room talking to just this handful of people here. But then, of course, we still have our streaming thing going, so I wanted to make sure I, continue to connect with the online audience, and then recognizing that we had people around the campus too. So, yeah, it was good.
Cool. So make your reservations for this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. or 11 a.m. No 7 p.m. service this Sunday. Get all the details at cccm.com. All right, let's get to some of your Bible questions at 888-564-6173. First, here's one from Facebook sent in by JC in Los Angeles, who says, I have a question and a prayer request. I'm struggling right now with my faith. It's hard to trust God because I don't know what He has planned for me. I pray, and sometimes I feel He answers, but then I start to doubt. I don't want to doubt. I want to trust God. My question is, why does God not speak to us the way He used to, like in the Old Testament? Are we not worthy anymore? I feel I'm not worthy. I sin every day, and it hurts that I can't trust God and fail Him every day. Please pray for me. I don't want to lose faith, and I don't want to doubt. I want to trust. Bobby, what do you tell JC?
Well, first, I'm sorry that you're feeling so internally torn. I've been there myself, and I think that one of the things that's difficult for us when we suffer is I know for me, what I'm trying to figure out is the fastest way to get out of it instead of asking what I can get out of it. And I think there's a big distinction there. Brene Brown has aptly put that comfort is overrated. There's something about just sitting in our discomfort that there's stuff that bubbles up to the surface, so to speak, on where God wants us to grow. And when I suffer and when I'm uncomfortable and when I've struggled with my dark season of doubt, I just tried to fix it by just getting the answer to the next question, And funny enough, that wasn't the solution. The solution was in embracing my finitude, becoming like a little child again, remembering the gospel and how I entered in to begin with, by recognizing my own sense of nothingness apart from God, recognizing my desperate need for Christ, and having a humble trust in Him. And so I would say sit in the discomfort of the tension that you're experiencing and maybe just ask yourself some questions, with the journal in hand. Where am I struggling to trust God? What lies do I believe? Why is it so hard for me to trust Him? And just try to listen, turn that stuff over to God, and out of the discomfort can emerge character. And I think when we try to abort the discomfort process too quickly, we will miss out on the fruit of being conformed to Christ.
Do you want to add anything, Pastor Brian?
Well, I would just say two things based on their question. Number one, because they said I'm just having, I'm not hearing God, so I'm having a hard time trusting God. Well, actually, it's when you're not hearing God that is the time to trust God, because when you're hearing Him, it's pretty easy to trust Him, right?
So
because
true.
You're like, okay, God told me this. But you have to realize, and this goes to your kind of second comment that you made about the Old Testament. The Old Testament covers a period of about 4,000 years. So we read over it, you can read over the New Testament or the Old Testament in a couple of weeks, and it just seems like God was speaking to everybody right and left. Abraham, God was revealing stuff to him. But if you actually stop and start looking at the time periods between when God spoke to Abraham, there's one time God, He spoke to Abraham when he was 75 years old. Didn't speak to him again until he was like 90. That's a long time. And that's really the way it is. Now God speaks to us, I think, thankfully He speaks to us more often than that. But I've gone through seasons where God has been silent for rather long periods of time. Silent at least on the things I really felt like I needed Him to talk to me about. He would speak to me about other things, but it's like, okay, that's fine, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about this problem I have right here. And that's when the silence was there. So like Bobby said, there is no quick solution, and it's in those seasons. You know this, Bobby. I know this. Brian, you might know this too. I can look back on those seasons, and although I never would have chose to go in them, and I certainly wouldn't want to go back to them, I know that God really did stuff in me during those times that needed to be done, that I didn't even think needed to be done. God spoke to me in ways that were so deep that they've carried me on through, decades now after the fact. So there is that place. And the final thing I would say is, there's always going to be that little nagging voice about how you failed God and therefore you're unworthy. And so, of course, God's not going to speak to you because you're such a sinner. And that is the voice that you really have to ignore. That's the voice that you just have to push that out and say, I am saved by God's grace. Yeah, I'm a sinner, but that's not going to stop God from ministering, helping, delivering, ultimately speaking to you.
Yeah, it seems like God's will too. There's so much more that we have access to because we do have the Scriptures, unlike those in the Bible, in particular as it relates to His moral will. Yeah. It's not as difficult to figure out what God's moral will is. I think our problem is in discerning His directional will for our life. And that can be the tricky part, like which direction do I go? Do you find that the case in our Christian life, Brian?
Yeah, again, you can, on one level, like you said, the moral will of God, it's right there in the pages of Scripture. I don't have to look far. I want God to speak to me about sexuality. Okay, wow, here it is. It's right here. He's speaking loud and clear.
Right.
But then I want him to speak to me about, what's his, specific plan for me in a particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a little bit of a different challenge.
JC, thanks for sending in your question, and you should probably pick up a copy of Bobby's book. It's called Doubting Toward Faith. It's available at oneminuteapologist.com. I think that would be a good resource for him, don't you?
Yes, The Journey to Confident Christianity.
Yep, check that out.
That's what it's about.
All right, 888-564-6173. One more question before we get to the phones, though. Brian, how is Cheryl doing?
Great question. She is doing very well. Yeah, she's doing really, really well. So, did you know, Bobby, that Cheryl had emergency surgery? Did you hear about that?
I heard briefly about it, and I heard on the radio that she was okay, and then that was, I don't know any details whatsoever.
Yeah, so last Wednesday she had emergency surgery. Last Tuesday night, she had to be rushed to emergency, and the paramedics came and all that. She was in really agonizing abdominal pain. And her heart rate was really low and her blood pressure was really low. What it ended up being is she had some scar tissue that had grown around her intestine and had choked off her intestine, so she had a blockage. And so thankfully the doctor was able to go in and take care of everything, did it with laparoscopic surgery, which is much less invasive, of course, than having to go in with an just a regular cutting you open. And so, she's well on the road to recovery. She has to take it easy. So she's walking around the neighborhood a bit. She can't help herself she's cooking herself soup and things. But apart from that, I am being her bondservant. So I am running up and down the stairs and I'm doing this and I'm getting that and I'm happy to do it because she's done that pretty much for me for the past 40 years. So, but yes, thank you for asking, Brian. She's doing well. And she's hoping, her big plan is to be back on Friday to be able to teach the Mark Challenge that she's doing on Fridays with a couple of the gals.
Oh, at the church?
At the church, yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah.
That'll be great. Yeah, that's where I tuned in from afar on Wednesday, I think, and John Wang had just briefly, you mentioned something about it, and then he said, "Oh, she's okay now," or something like that. So thank you for filling me in. I didn't realize the details of that.
Yeah,
that's great.
See what happens when you're not here?
Right. Yeah.
Everything just falls apart. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I'm here for you.
Stay here. Stay here. 888-564-6173 is the telephone number. Let's begin our time on the phones with Diane in Yorba Linda. Thanks for calling us today, Diane.
Hi. Yeah, my question is, why is it that so many Christians are divided on the rapture?
Okay, you mean like pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, etc.?
No, either they believe in it or they say it's totally not true.
Mm-hmm. All right.
That there's nothing in the Bible then.
Yeah, well, why? Well, on the one side of it, the rapture is not as clear as some people assume it to be. I believe in the rapture, and I believe that the rapture is going to happen before the judgment comes upon the earth, known as the Great Tribulation. But I will admit that it's not as crystal clear as sometimes it is assumed to be or by some presented to be. So there's a little bit of a challenge in interpreting certain passages. And, I'm up for the challenge, and I've talked about it, and I've written on it and so forth. So I think that it is, I'm convinced of it myself. But I do understand why some people just don't see it. They just approach certain passages with a different lens, and they interpret things a slightly different way based upon maybe their, presuppositions theologically. And so for some of my favorite people in the history of the church as far as their preaching of the gospel would go, did not believe in the rapture. A famous preacher from back in the previous century, a British preacher named Martin Lloyd-Jones, who is a staple for almost every Bible expositor, he thought that the idea of the rapture was absolutely foolish. He just had no time for it. Whenever he would refer to it, he would refer to it, in that sort of a way, this silly idea of the rapture, he would say, But, I mean, even all the guys I know that believe in the rapture, they also love the preaching of Martin Lloyd-Jones. Mm-hmm. They just didn't like his preaching on the rapture. But actually, he never preached on the rapture because he didn't believe in it. So it's a difference of interpretation is what it comes down to. And like I said, it's not as crystal clear as we'd like it to be. So it's not one of those things where you can go, hey, look, right here, it's this simple. It says right here that the rapture is going to come. It doesn't say that, so it just makes it a little more challenging.
Now, would you say it's one of those issues that we can agree to disagree on?
Absolutely.
I mean, we've said that about pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib,
Absolutely,
but what about not believing in it at all?
Yeah, I mean, yes, not believing in it at all. And there have been plenty of Christians throughout history that did not believe in a rapture. I mean, that's just a fact. And the truth of the matter is that I think the apostles believed it. I think they taught it in their letters. But probably a couple hundred years into church history, I think it faded off the scene and didn't resurface till relatively recently. Now, so some people say, oh, the rapture is a new idea. Like in the 1800s, these people in England, this Edward Irving guy and these people, they came up with it. Well, I think they recovered something that had been lost. But then somebody would argue, well, come on, you can't lose a doctrine like that and recover it. And my argument against that is, well, they lost the cardinal doctrine of Christianity, salvation by grace through faith. So if they could lose the cardinal doctrine of Christianity, I think they could also lose some sort of side doctrines.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, you're asking too, just to clarify, because there could be people out there, when you're saying that there's people that don't hold to the rapture at all, it doesn't mean that they don't believe in a second coming, that Christ is coming again. They just don't distinguish between the rapture and the second coming. Rather, they see that as one and the same event. Yeah. And so we do as Christians believe that Christ is coming again bodily. Yeah. It's just the timing of that gets really confused, and I think we should extend a lot of grace.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like a pre-tribulational view, what you believe is that Christ will come for his people before he comes to set up his kingdom on the earth. And there will be a period of time, 7 years is normally what we would think. But others believe, some people believe in a rapture, and this is kind of the post-trib view, right, where you are caught up to meet the Lord in the air, but the Lord is on his way to set up his kingdom on the earth. So you're caught up to meet the Lord, and then you're right back on the earth, momentarily as he begins to set up his kingdom. But yeah, Martin Lloyd-Jones obviously believed in the second coming of Christ. He just didn't believe it was a secret rapture. That's what he called it.
Secret rapture.
Secret rapture. He said it in Welsh.
That's what it sounded like.
He had a strong Welsh accent. Just think Scrooge McDuck saying secret rapture, and you've got Lloyd-Jones's.
You probably got to go to some really neat church experiences when you were living in England. I mean,
well, one of the great honors I had was to preach at his old church at Westminster Chapel. Oh. I mean, that was like a dream come true.
Heck yeah. That had to be amazing.
Yeah, that was really great.
Just the acoustics in the room must have been amazing.
Yeah, I used to covet that church. I really thought, Lord, I'd love to have this church. And then I preached in it, and it's like, man, this thing is old. This is like a dinosaur. So I kind of lost my affection for it after I preached there.
Looks like Diane also wants to know if all children will go up in the rapture. What do you guys think of that? Bobby?
By children, I guess you just would have to define the age. I mean, I know that that's an debated point, an age of accountability, but I do think ultimately people have to have some cognizance of what they're being held accountable for. And so I think in the term that she's putting it, are all these 2 and 3 and 4 or 5-year-olds going to go up and be with Jesus? It's hard for me to picture, just a bunch of toddlers being perpetually hosed. I think that there is some sense to being held accountable for the knowledge that you do have. And I don't think that a toddler is going to have that understanding. But by children, if somebody has adult children, right? Are those adult children going to be grafted in at the expense of mom and dad's faith? No, they're going to be accountable to their own belief. Again, there's lots of ancillary questions we can get into, as I can already see people's brains thinking, oh, well, but what about this? But what about this? Yeah. And they can call up and we can talk around the angles if they want.
You know what I like on that question? I just like what Jesus said when, in regard to the little children, he said, allow the little children to come to me.
Yeah.
And do not prevent them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And I think that answers it. I'm fine
Absolutely.
with that right there.
Me too. That's
the little children.
Thank you for bringing that up.
They're going to be taken in the rapture.
Thank you for being biblical.
I didn't think you were unbiblical. I just thought I'd throw a scripture.
No, I didn't take it that way. I just thought that was a great answer. I mean, let's bring Jesus' words in. That's good.
That's what we do
That's
on
right.
Pastor's Perspective. Diane, thanks for calling us today at 888-564-6173. Let's go to Tennessee. Talk to Mike. Hello, Mike. Welcome. You're on with Pastor Brian Broderson and Dr. Bobby Conway.
Yes. How are y'all doing today?
Good, bud.
Doing great.
Well, my wife saw
Pastor
Broderson teaching with a cap on today.
She saw him teaching with a cap on?
He was on YouTube.
Uh-oh.
Is that
my question?
With a cap on?
Yeah, my question. Yeah, my question is: does God hear the prayers of the Jewish people? Because Jesus is the only access to God. Therefore, do we pray to the same God?
All right, Bobby, what do you say?
I think God hears the prayers of people that aren't Christians. Now, let me qualify that. Every prayer that somebody prays to become a Christian was the prayer of a non-believer. So if we say, oh, God doesn't hear the prayers of non-believers, well, every first prayer that somebody prays, so to speak, to get saved, they were a non-believer praying for salvation. The question is does God answer other prayers or hear other prayers? Of course, God hears the prayers because he's all-knowing. So to say that God doesn't hear the prayers, we would be limiting God's omniscience, which he's all-knowing. So he does hear them. Then the question is does God answer the prayers? And that can be a little bit tricky. You can see a couple spots in Scripture where it seems as if God could, show some favor in a particular situation as he takes care of the heathen or the unconverted. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all to think of an omnibenevolent God who shows mercy and grace to a person who is looking for direction, who's hungry, trying to feed their children. They just wouldn't know specifically who to thank in response to the answer of that prayer. So I don't think you're not going to have this dynamic prayer life with God if you're a non-believer. But I do think that there are people who are even Christians that look back and can see, man, I said this little prayer before I was even saved, and it seems like God kind of just protected me in this. Well, there's nothing wrong. That doesn't do anything to refute our Christianity. It just makes God even greater and bigger and more loving and compassionate. Yet, as Christians, we learn the way of having a really amazing prayer life with him.
Yeah, and I think more specifically to the Jewish question, because so with a Jewish person, they are praying to the God of the Bible, at least as far as they're concerned. They're praying to the God of the Bible.
Absolutely.
But yet at the same time, they're rejecting the Messiah that the God of the Bible sent. So that Jesus said it this way. He said, unless you believe that I am the one, you will die in your sins. So, he tells them that unless they put their faith in him, they're not going to make it to heaven ultimately. But I agree with you, Bobby, that I think that, God will, despite the fact that they are not believing in him the way they should, he will sometimes answer their prayers. But I think, with the purpose of pointing them ultimately to himself in the truest sense, And And we've all heard stories of not only Jews, but I've heard stories of Muslims who have prayed to Allah. And, Nabil is a great story, right? Because he's seeking Allah, but he
Finding
finds Jesus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same kind of an idea, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think it just highlights the mercy of God, like you said, the benevolence of God. Yeah.
Mike, thank you for calling us from Tennessee with your question. We're going to take a break now, and then we'll be back with more of your phone calls at 888-564-6173.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Pastor's Perspective program. 888-564-6173 is the telephone number to call. Again, that's 888-564-6173. Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway answering your questions today. Let's do another one from Facebook before we go back to the phones. Greg in San Diego sent this one in. What is your take on pastors using the following they have built on social media as a way to promote their business or peddle a program that's multi-level marketing, and the large majority of their clients are out of their congregation? This bothers me on many fronts, but one main one is they seem to give more glory to the product of the weight loss and increased health than they do to God, using terms like, I've been in ministry for over 20 years, struggling with my weight and self-confidence, and I was never able to get free from my food addictions until I discovered this program. Should I bring this up to my pastor and discuss my concerns? Brian, what do you think?
I think it's wrong for a pastor to do that. I don't think that a pastor should use his church as a means to, any kind of personal gain. Pastors get paid and so forth. And any of that multi-level marketing stuff, any of that pyramid type stuff that does come into churches, and sometimes it's led by pastors. I personally think that's wrong, and I don't think anyone should ever do it. If you have a product that's really helped you, and you want to, you're talking to somebody and you can see that this is going to be helpful for them, you could recommend it. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're involved in selling it, then I think that's a big problem. I think that's a big conflict of interest right there.
Greg, thank you for your question today on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173. Did you want to add anything to that? You kind of walked in the middle of it, so you may not even know what it's about.
I wouldn't even know what I'm adding.
Yes. All right, to Corona we go. Here's Dwayne. Welcome to the program, Dwayne.
Thank you, gentlemen. So my question is, I'm very indecisive in regards to, say a traditional burial or cremation. And the reason that I have a hard time with it is, as far as I know in the Bible, obviously it talks about Jesus going to a tomb or a burial. And, with Abraham, he bought a plot of land for burial, but they don't talk about cremation. And so I don't know if it's a matter of the fact that it's not spoken at all in the Bible, or if it really just isn't that important at all.
Okay. Bobby, what say you?
This is something that really, I say, comes down to a conscience level for individuals. Keep in mind, obviously, biblically, to your point, what you see is burial. Now, I don't think it's a sin if somebody, has a loved one cremated. There are places like Japan where you do not even have the property or the space to be able to do burials, so it's not even allowed. So you're going to have cremation. So particular cultures or societies, you can envision if it's land swamped and there's no place to have a cemetery, you're not even going to be able to do burial. You're going to be left to another format like cremation. So I think if we have the luxury and we are blessed with the finances and we can do the burial, that's fantastic. That's great. That will be very much in line with what we see in the scripture. But I don't think for the poor person or the person living in a culture whereby they don't allow for burial, that they should be worried that God's going to have a problem bringing that body to resurrection. And I think that they could do that with peace. But as I said at the beginning, each person needs to work through their own conscience on these issues.
Dwayne, thanks for your question today on Pastor's Perspective. Next, we'll go to Santa Ana and talk to Rick. Hello, Rick. You're on with Pastor Brian Broderson and Dr. Bobby Conway.
Yes, I studied 2 Timothy, and 2 Timothy 1:8, Paul mentions he's a prisoner. But why isn't 2 Timothy considered a prison epistle? Is it because it's a letter to an individual?
Well, it depends on who you read. Some people include it in the prison epistles and some don't. So, the prison epistles are Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon normally. And so all of those, yes, are obviously written to congregations. Philemon is written to an individual person, written from prison. I think probably because the imprisonments were different. So Paul's imprisonment, when he wrote those, what are commonly called the prison epistles, he's released from prison, and then he resumes his ministry. And then 2 Timothy is his imprisonment, where he actually ends up, being executed, martyred at the end of that imprisonment there. So, but like I said, some people include it, some people don't. I always include it. So even Sunday, because I'm preaching through Colossians, I mention the prison epistles, and I mention 2 Timothy because Paul was in prison, like you said. So it's a prison epistle as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's where it gets kind of tricky, isn't it? I mean, categorizing stuff, we have to remember that, when these letters were being written, they didn't know how, the early church would take this and begin to group and categorize everything. And so there's not always neat categories.
Yeah.
And so pastoral epistles is typically where 2 Timothy goes, and it makes sense. You got 1st, 2 Timothy, and the book of Titus, and these are written to help these younger pastors out. Nevertheless, I can see how you can throw it in a message series on the prison epistles. So it can be in both places. Like, why not say it's in both places? It's one book in both places.
Yeah, and I mean, after all, these are human categories, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like God said, okay, put the prison epistles right there. It's just these four.
Yeah, it's even like, I think the prison epistles, what are we, like AD 60 to 62, and then here this is going to be up around the 68 time frame, 2 Timothy. Even those dates, I find myself, when I'm reading stuff, I go, man, I can get a little bit scratching my head on how tight we can be even some of the dating. I know some of the reasons, like, okay, this is before Jerusalem was destroyed and some of that kind of stuff. That makes sense, but it's not always as clear as I'd like.
Yeah. Rick, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173. We'll go to Rialto now. Josie wants to know what language Adam and Eve spoke in the Garden of Eden. Hi there, Josie. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Pastor.
Hello.
And hello, Brian.
Hello.
Before I get to the question, can I ask you a couple of questions, Brian?
Me
Brian
personally?
Perez.
Oh, like what?
Uh-oh. You put him on the spot. He's looking kind of nervous right now.
No, it's for Brian Perez.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I believe it was on a Wednesday when Tony Evans was having, I guess it was an interview with Brian Broderson.
Yeah.
That was there.
Mm-hmm.
And his son was there, but Michael David had taken over your ship.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if I heard right when Michael was talking about his father and himself. I thought I heard Michael say that his dad had passed earlier in the year.
Yes, that is true.
That is true.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And can you please tell him, because I hadn't heard anything because I had been praying for his dad.
Thank you, Josie. He's probably listening right now, and I'm sure he appreciates it.
Okay. So can you tell him to please accept a late condolences from me?
I will do that, Josie. Thank you.
And also, I know that his birthday is this month, but I'm not sure it was yesterday or today.
Michael David's birthday is today, in fact.
Today?
Yes. That's why he's not here right now. He might be here tomorrow, though. But yeah.
Well, can you please tell him I said happy birthday?
I will do that.
Because he's the same age as my youngest daughter.
Oh, okay.
Except he's a month and some weeks.
Got it. All right.
So,
yeah, I can tell him that.
Okay. So thank you, Brian Perez, for that.
You're welcome.
And now to my question.
Yes.
I think it's an easy question, but I was wondering that when God created Adam and Eve, what language did he give them to speak to each other?
Okay. Bobby, what would you say?
There are some who would say Hebrew because, like, you take Adam and Eve Isha, and kind of like, oh, this is a little bit of the Hebrew language. But honestly, I just don't think we can really know. I mean, not only that, how much of it would have been lost. So I'm content personally to wait to heaven to find out what the language was exactly. Brian, would you add to that?
I would just add an amen. I am content to wait because there's absolutely no way we can know that.
I just don't think we can.
And sometimes people sort of, I've known people like this. Maybe you've come across this too, Bobby, where people, sort of romanticize a language. Like Hebrew is like really the heavenly language. Man, if you learn Hebrew, then you're kind of speaking God's language. But the Philistines spoke Hebrew as well. And so, the surrounding peoples in the land of Canaan, it was really the language of Canaan is what they were speaking. So there was nothing spiritual about it. It was, just simply a language. So what, you think of the New Testament, like Paul argues in Corinthians, how the glory of the New Covenant so far surpasses the glory of the Old Covenant. Then the New Covenant's in Greek.
Yeah.
And so Greek's not a spiritual language necessarily. It came from the Greeks, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think that we know that before the Tower of Babel, all the world had one language. We just don't know what it was. I think it was English myself.
Well, even what you said, it's a good point. Okay. I mean, Abraham, he's Abram called out of Ur of the Chaldeans, and then he rise in Canaan, and that's where his offspring would begin to be, develop, and that's the language that people would have. God's an accommodating God, and by that, He meets us where we are to bring us to where He's at. And so if He would have so chosen to wait until this day and age to make Himself known and call out somebody out of Southern California, it would be English or maybe Spanish. It isn't the language that, and that's a neat thing about God. He's the God who knows all languages, because we see Christianity, it's systemic, it's worldwide, and we hear Him speaking to us in our own language. I mean, that's a neat thing. Like when we sense God, we sense that He's speaking our language, because He's accommodating. He meets us where we are to bring us to where He's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Adam named all the animals in that language. So after the Tower of Babel, did they have to rename the animals based on all the new languages, you think?
Well, remember, after the Tower of Babel, I was thinking the flood. Yeah. Well, obviously, all animals are named differently in different languages, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you call a cat in Spanish?
Gato.
Gato, not cat.
No, that's true.
Okay, or a dog, perro?
Perro.
Perro.
Yes.
Okay. I knew somebody who had a yard
too.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Perro.
That was good. Brian did it.
Perro.
Not bad.
All right.
You almost said pelo, which is hair in Spanish. So.
And
Forgive me, all my
said
Spanish
pelo,
friends.
which is a pillow in English.
Yes.
You almost said, yeah.
Oh, the pillow. Okay. And not to be confused with Pele, the soccer player.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pillow,
or
Pele.
my pillow.
Or
Bella.
Josie, thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. To Rialto we go. Another call from Rialto. This is Lori. Hello, you're on Pastor's Perspective, Lori. Lori, you there? I think Lori's listening to her radio, so we will let her know that she needs to listen to the telephone here. Jose, we'll go to you in Covina. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Jose.
God bless, pastors. My question is that should Christians get involved with Alcoholics Anonymous?
What do you mean involved in?
Like practice, participate, get involved, try to learn how Alcoholics Anonymous works, their 12-step program.
Are you? Can I ask you, Jose, why you're asking that question? Are you thinking about doing that yourself, or do you have somebody who's involved with it or wanting to get involved with it?
I have a friend that is involved in it.
Yeah.
I'm in a sober living home now, but I am a born-again Christian, and he insists that I learn that way. He's also a believer. He knows the gospel pretty well.
Yeah.
But I just don't feel that it's something that is for us. I think the word of the Lord is enough. The Bible is more than enough for us. But he insists, and I just don't agree.
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to agree on that. I think it just depends on the person. I think obviously the Bible is sufficient for all of us, but not everybody is able to, take the word and assimilate it and have it work in their lives exactly the same way for a variety of different reasons. And I know that, one of the things that AA does, it's not so much spiritual, it's more sometimes practical. They help you just with some common sense stuff that I have found that people who have had a drug issue or an alcohol issue over life, they've just kind of lost some common sense about a lot of things. And so I've seen where those programs can be really helpful in just teaching you about discipline and things like that again, and put you around people that you can be encouraged by, and gives you an opportunity to let your light of the gospel shine, so that people know that, this idea of a higher power, there's actually a person who is God who, wants to give you his power to give you victory. And I think your friend probably feels the same way. Like you said, he knows the gospel, he's into AA. But if you don't feel like going, then there's no, it's not like you have to go. You can certainly, I know plenty of people who have navigated life after alcoholism through just committing themselves really to Christ and the gospel and to a church, and God's brought them through. So,
did you want to add anything, Bobby?
AA has been a lifesaver to me on a couple big occasions. When I was 21 and got clean, I did over 400 meetings in my first year of sobriety. After a relapse, nearly 23 years later, I did probably another 150 or so meetings. And so I found it very, very effective and helpful. And frankly, the second time around, I found that I felt more safe in AA than I did in the local church, which is a sad thing. I'm not saying that's the case for everybody. Right. It's hard for non-alcoholics to understand an alcoholic. Like a non-alcoholic just thinks, just don't drink or just don't do that. And it's not that simple. I could walk into an AA meeting right now and we all get each other in a way that we understand the insanity of the way that our brain thinks. What's an alcoholic? One who obsesses on alcohol when he or she is not drinking, and then once they take that first drink, the phenomenon of crave kicks in. And it feels as if you can't get satisfied. It's like just you're starving, and you just keep taking more and more and more, and there's something weird there. And I get it when somebody explains it to me. Now, I would say what Brian said is true. There are plenty of people that can go on, get clean, have a spiritual experience. The steps, really, Dr. Bob and Bill, they extracted those from the book of James, 1 Corinthians 13, and the Sermon on the Mount. So they're just biblical principles. And then lastly, I would say that it depends on where someone's at again. Like I had a season where I was uncomfortable because they're saying, you can't talk about Jesus, you can't talk about Jesus. Well, then fast forward all those years later, I thought, well, it's okay. I know who I'm praying to. I know who I'm thinking about. This is a great opportunity for me to be doing evangelism. So we actually started AA in our church in North Carolina, and we were having 30, 40 people come every week. I thought, what a great outreach. Then many of them started coming to our church as a result of that. And then I wanted to get Celebrate Recovery started in there before I left, because I think that can work in tandem. You can pass people off from an AA to a Celebrate Recovery to go learn more about the Christian experience.
Jose, I hope that answers your question. Thanks for calling us today here on Pastor's Perspective at 888-564-6173. I think we have Lori back now from Rialto. Hello, Lori, you there?
I'm here.
All right,
Thank
what's
you
your
for taking
question?
my call.
Sure thing.
My question is, my sister was telling me today she heard a pastor, God knows whom, but he was saying that the first of the 7 seals has already been broken or open, and I want to know if it's true, and if so, which one? Is it really the first seal? What's going on?
All right. Pastor Brian.
No, first seal has not been opened yet, because the first seal is the Antichrist coming forth and basically conquering the world through, a process of political maneuvers and, various things. So, no, you will know, well, you won't know if you are participating in the rapture. We believe that the rapture will occur before that happens. But the seals are reserved for a very specific time in history. So there are no seals that are presently being opened. Jesus is the one who's opening the seals, remember. And the scene where Jesus is opening the seals is the scene where this vast multitude from every nation, tribe, and language is giving praise and honor and glory to him because he was slain and has redeemed us to God. So that's the context for that. So the church is there gathered around the throne of God in heaven, and Jesus takes the scroll, he begins to loose the seals, and the first one is this figure on a white horse going forth conquering and to conquer, has a bow and a crown on his head and a victor's wreath on his head. So I think that is clearly the Antichrist. Some people say that's Jesus, but it can't be Jesus because Jesus is the one actually opening the seals. So it doesn't make sense that he would be opening the seals and also be the one riding the horse. Jesus does ride a white horse. He does come back to the earth on a white horse according to Revelation 19, but it's a different situation there. So.
Lori, thanks for your question. Next, we'll go to Spokane, Washington. Here is Sydney. Hello. Thanks for calling Pastor's Perspective, Sydney.
Hi, yeah, I'm wondering where you stand on whether people are born gay, and also what does the Bible say about someone who identifies as gay? Should they remain celibate or not?
Okay. Bobby, what do you think?
I'm really excited to have Sean McDowell on my YouTube channel tomorrow. He's written a book on a lot of these issues, him and John Stone Street with Chuck Colson Center. And Sean will be on tomorrow at 5:15 Pacific time with me, and we will be getting into more of this. And with the big Supreme Court case that just got passed down, we'll be able to delve into some of that as well. Regarding are people born gay, I do answer this question in a video on my YouTube channel, 1 Minute Apologist. I don't think we can prove scientifically that people are born gay. I do know that we can see people when they are young, and they might seem that they are more feminine, and we wonder about what their sexual preference will be when they get older based on some of the mannerisms that are taking place when they're younger. But as far as people being born gay, I mean, there have been twin studies. It would seem as if twins who share the same genetics, if one's gay, the other would be gay. If one's straight, the other would be straight. And it's not always the case. So that seems to scientifically refute that. I do think that there can be influences from obviously an early age that can work in that direction. And so scientifically, there's no gay gene that proves that somebody is born gay. Now, should they remain celibate if somebody is to come to an understanding that they are gay? And I would say that biblically, the Bible is clear that sex has a context between a man and a woman in the context of marriage. And so even straight people that aren't married are to remain celibate until they're married. This doesn't make it any easier to digest, I'm sure, for the person struggling with same-sex attractions. And I would never want to minimize how hard that must be to hear. Wow, so I just got to, lay that up. But Brian, you're familiar with several books that you could suggest, right, that could help in this.
And I think one of the best books on the subject is A War of Loves by David Bennett. And David Bennett is he's same-sex attracted. He identifies as a gay man still, but as a gay man who has chosen to follow Christ and understanding that following Christ means that he will live a sanctified life, in regard to his sexuality. So he will not be in a sexual relationship, and he's committed to glorifying Jesus through celibacy. And but his story is quite fascinating. He didn't always believe that. He became a Christian. He still thought for a few years that he was actually going to marry, and he was going to marry a same-sex partner. And yet, over several years, God just began to really show him what holiness was and what he was calling him to. So that is my favorite book on that topic. So David Bennett, A War of Loves, I would highly recommend that book. And you can get it, he reads it too, so whatever you call that.
Audiobook?
Audiobook, that's it.
Very good. All right. That's all the time we have on today's program. Sorry that we couldn't get to your call, those of you on hold. Call us tomorrow. We open up the lines about 7 minutes before the program begins at 3 o'clock Pacific time. We would love to hear your question. For Pastor Brian Broderson and Dr. Bobby Conway, I'm Brian Perez. Thank you so much for listening. Good night and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/pastorsperspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.